scratching away emotion's enamel, and retroubling limpid pools, and dreaming what's lost, Delphi miracles, though know thyself, for there's the oracle, etched in all-seeing stone at the earth's centre, when such a point could be determined, its vapours organic, if not kindly. Shall we wish to forget all prophecy, let unforecasted waves break upon our faces, to be followed by the watery sun, which rides without thought to observe itself, and would be blinded if it tried.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Solacene, the podcast where we imagine a beautiful, sustainable, tactile future. I liked that poem, Aaron.
Thank you. I said a few weeks ago I was going to challenge myself to actually start writing ones I liked for the podcast, That's what I did this morning. I've been reading Ovid, as you know, or rereading Ovid's Metamorphoses, and so that poem kind of steals a lot of the imagery from that. In particular, something that I thought was relevant for today's episode is a recurring image in the Metamorphoses of clear pools of water, which are always described in very lovely terms, but in fact almost always spell disaster or tragedy for the unfortunate characters.
I see.
And all that glitters is not gold, etc. Probably the most famous one of those stories is Narcissus, who was
staring into a pool of water, got too close.
Exactly, staring at himself. And so I thought that was in some way relevant for today's episode, which is about emotions, and I kind of stretched that to behaviors or personalities that the internet perhaps is provoking in us, or is subduing in us, or is just changing in us in all these various ways. But before we get started on that, if you all like the podcast, you can view us on YouTube. It's kind of dark in here today, so I'm not sure how much of us you can see, but we are here, Solacene Podcast on YouTube. And also, if you just like listening to the audio, leave a rating, review, or subscribe.
Now back to the show. So how has the internet changed our emotions? Example 1, what we just did there. That's not how we would normally talk. But when you're trying to plug yourself on the internet, it's kind of awkward. So you use this sort of ironic referencing other podcasters. You kind of reference things a lot when you're uncomfortable, I find. Yeah,
you do echo things that you've heard before. You lean on memory rather than having to actually sweat it out yourself.
Yeah.
But also, so you're talking about being on camera or being something that will be shared, which is not 100% unique to the internet, right? Because people were filming themselves long before the internet.
Yeah.
But perhaps today it's almost synonymous because the entry-level way of putting things out is obviously through social media.
Which is a film or a photo or... Yeah, there's no, voice social media.
Well, that's kind of what we're doing a little bit.
I guess, yeah. So how do you think the internet has changed your emotions, Aaron? Anything stand out in particular?
Today's two questions, that of emotions and influences, are kind of intertwined in my mind. So rather than making my usual weirdly neat notes, today's is a bit of a brainstorm?
Brain dump?
Brain dump. What's the name for that thing that they would always encourage us to do in grade school?
A web.
A thought web, food chain. So there's just kind of lines and little snakes and little notes all over my notes, all over my pages. But the first one is stoicism / apathy / depersonalization or derealization. And the slashes are doing a lot of heavy lifting here because these things aren't actually equivalent. But that's kind of what I wanted to draw attention to, and in myself, which is the question you asked. I think that it's not a coincidence that Stoicism has had such a big kind of resurgence, especially among young people in the last decade or so, as a philosophy. But I think part of the danger of this is that the ideology gets corrupted to where we're not sure if we're being stoic or if we're just not feeling things anymore, or if we're just not feeling things as ourselves anymore.
Yeah, when I was introduced to the concept of Stoicism, it really made me I dove headfirst into it for a while.
Sure.
In a way that I don't think any other philosophy has ever captured my attention in the way that Stoicism did.
16-year-old Alicia reading Marcus Aurelius.
I was unfortunately older than 16.
Yeah.
But still, I was like, oh my goodness, this is so important today. And because the internet's so volatile, not toxic, that's the word I was looking for. It's just like, you're scrolling on Facebook and one moment it's like, oh wow, my best friend had a baby.
Yes.
Exciting. the next one is like 7,000 people died in a flood. And it's just like so volatile, and in a way that I feel like in human history we haven't experienced. Like, I'm sure television has slightly, like, we kind of rely on that for entertainment in film, and even in plays and stuff, you rely on the juxtaposition of emotions to keep people engaged. But it's so personal and so, like, human, whereas I feel like if it's on the stage or on a movie screen, you're like, this isn't real. But when you see it on social media, like, it is real, and it really just kind of brings you on this journey and this ride that isn't really great for your brain, bringing it all back around. That's why I feel like for me, Stoicism was such an interesting and such an attractive way of being, as a way to kind of protect yourself against the barrage of inputs that we get being online, and just kind of then being in the world, because people kind of reflect that in their conversation style, I find.
Of course. Because
it's like, I feel like we used to, it's just like you would just talk about normal day-to-day things. But now it's like, you could just be having a normal conversation with someone, then they're going to drop these random bombs about things that have happened in the world that you just were like, I didn't need to hear that almost. So you need this shell to exist in the world of the internet.
Yeah, I agree that Stoicism has obviously garnered perhaps a new appeal because of the volatility and just the omnipresence of the internet. I think perhaps the fact that it was around since ancient Rome, I believe, means that it isn't unique to current times, but very well suited perhaps. Kind of the point that I wanted to make is that while it might be a useful shell, as you called it, I think to the untrained mind, to the untrained emotions, which all of us are pretty much, especially if you're young, you can just be becoming apathetic and think, wow, I'm so stoic. Stoicism, I don't think, is really about unfeelingness. It's more about how you process these things, how you express them especially. And apathy is more like, to use your example, 7,000 people died, whatever. It's like that. And derealization, which is maybe a kind of going even further down, or just a different branch, is something like, oh, this tragedy happened to me, or this really good thing happened to me, but I don't quite feel how I should. It feels as if I'm observing somebody else's life. And I think this is something that the internet, scrolling, social media can really provoke in us, and is maybe a more nuanced and interesting and pervasive, but harder to solve issue than that of comparison, which people always talk about in social media, which I think is a problem. And I have written down under emotions as, comparison is the thief of joy, and social media makes us not really sure whether we should be happy because, wow, that person looks so much happier with their life and their life looks so much better. But I think this derealization aspect where the scrolling kind of separates maybe our mind from our body, or our mind from our persona, or something like this.
Yeah, I think that's not talked about a lot.
Yeah.
And I mean,
it's because even it's hard to word. It's
Yeah, but it's happened to me at different points in my life where you get so detached from your own existence. Not necessarily that you're like that the internet becomes super real, but it's just that you're so overwhelmed with the inputs of news and stuff that anything that happens to you just feels insignificant.
I don't think it really happens while you are scrolling. I think we kind of practice it inadvertently while we are scrolling. We practice this mindlessness.
Yeah, and it's not like healthy non-attachment or healthy stoicism. It's this unfeeling, because especially like with stoicism, the point is like unresponsiveness, and kind of like you have an intense emotion, but instead of like lashing out, or instead of being like jumping for joy, you're kind of like, oh, this is really great, because like you can just kind of express it in a more nuanced way instead of constantly swinging between the extremes, because it's not great for you. And it's funny this is what you wanted to start with, because this was my first thought when I was thinking about how the internet has impacted our emotions, is that it at once made us numb, but it also makes us have these weirdly like animated responses to things, perhaps. Like you can kind of go either way. And maybe you start out with these really over-the-top, like, hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel energy. And then you
in real life, you mean?
Yeah, and it kind of can maybe go between those two.
Yeah, well, that's the next point I had, which is something about mimicking or echoing. I mean, you know, because you work with children and you see that sometimes they would just straight up not even just take a line of dialogue from a YouTube video or from a film, but an emote, as I like to say.
Yeah.
You know, they'll just start reacting to things in the way that they've seen on television, which is not how real humans react.
Mm-hmm.
So I have 5 points, I guess, stemming off emotions. One of them was that stoicism thing. The next one being activity. And it's just that I think we feel things when we're doing and living. That's the healthiest type of emotion or type of feeling. That which happens to you in your life is, you know, ideally when you are some kind of actor.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I love film and I love arts. I love going to a museum. I love going to a cinema. And I know that we kind of feel things when you watch a sad film or a happy film. Last night we watched a movie called Moonstruck. And what would you say that evoked in you feeling-wise?
That movie made me feel... I laughed quite a few times.
Right.
So joy.
Yeah.
But it also definitely made me feel icky during certain parts where there was this blurry consent being shown on screen. But we can get into that on our feminism episode. But yeah, it made me feel good, but also yucky.
It's a comedy and it's a romance.
Yeah.
So I think the comedy, you say it makes you feel joy, but it's a different kind of joy to that which you feel when you are out and things are happening in your own life.
Yeah.
Right? Like, because you're watching it on a screen, you know it's not real. So I think the internet, we kind of outsource our emotions akin to if we were just watching movies 24/7. Or what I have written down is some kind of emotional voyeurship, where a really easy example is streamers or reaction channels who always exaggerate their reactions. And the person sitting there watching it is never reacting in so animated a way. You're just kind of letting them react for you in a weird way. So I think, that's the way that the internet has changed our emotion in the lack of activity, I suppose.
Yeah, that's a really great point, that if you want to feel joy, you just have a kind of go-to funny video, and vice versa. If you want to feel sad, you just can kind of watch a sad movie or go on a sad story online.
And there's a place for that. There's obviously a massive place for art, but there should also be a big place for action. And I just think the balance has swayed quite a lot. Third thing is quite simple, feeling small. I think the global population of the internet, Twitter being the new town square, you know, the real town square probably could only fit like 2,000 people. Twitter can fit like 2 billion. It can lead to nihilism in a lot of people, and it just makes you feel like you are only one of billions. And as I said, the comparison thief of joy thing. Next one, quite pertinent to this week, when Apple announced their Vision Pro headset. I didn't want to mention that too much on this episode, but it's the fear of losing moments or losing memories, especially, because one of the things that you noted as especially dystopian in that feature advertisement trailer was the moment where the father was sitting down, like reliving memories of his children in 3D, which had been captured through the glasses. And there's this thing where obviously that's a lovely moment. You're playing with your 2 daughters or whatever, and you need to capture it. And I don't think we should never capture it. You know, I think taking photos is fine. I like taking videos and taking photos, but I just think the internet, perhaps we are so characterized by this existential fear of losing emotions. We need to remember how I felt in this moment, even sometimes when it's bad, which leads to those kind of cringy TikToks of people crying after a breakup. And there's an element of the hoarder here, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
Rather than instead of stacking newspapers or whatever, we're stacking photos, and we're just not really acknowledging that so much of the beauty of life, or of, let's say, growing up in this instance, is the transience of the moment.
Yeah, the non-attachment. Again, it's just like we want to be attached to everything and hold on to it. And perhaps because we constantly are seeing these elaborate stories unfolding online, we worry that a moment will pass us by and we won't even recognize it. So we then capture things so we can kind of retroactively look back and be like, yeah, that was so wonderful. And it's like, but if it passes, it passes, sort of thing.
Yeah.
And I'm not anti-photos or like capturing, but we need to really practice this of just like letting go, because I can only imagine the emotional turmoil you would feel if all of a sudden all your photos were deleted. Like, everyone's had that moment where their phone breaks and you're kind of like, oh man, that's just like thousands of photos down the toilet or whatever. The internet has really changed how we perceive other people's emotions in the moment, and also just like online, because of this constant performance. When someone's like actually feeling sad next to you, you might not recognize it, or you might mistake it for something else, like as being upset with you, or like it's really easy to kind of mistake people's emotions in real life and online because everything's blended in this weird way. It's like a new language of emotion that's evolved. That's
a really good phrase, new language of emotion.
Yeah, I read this study, to give people a little bit of hope, and they sent kids away to a no phone camp for a week, and the kids who came back from there could recognize people's emotions much better than they could beforehand, and there was a control group, and the control group had no change in how they perceived people's emotions. So it's like there is hope for us.
Nature is healing.
Yeah, exactly.
Just get off the internet. Simple as that. Final thing I had was narcissism, which is, quite obvious, and I think we'll blend in, or we'll lead in quite nicely to the next part of the episode.
Yeah, I have just like one or two more points on emotions and the internet. It's not necessarily how the internet has changed our emotions, but how it pries on them. Like, that is the most valuable resource for social media platforms, and even just like marketers online, is capturing your emotions. Like, we'll go back to TV as an example, but you remember when like commercials would trend? You'd be like, did you see that new Volvo commercial? Oh, it made me cry, or whatever. Like, sure. People kind of having these really visceral reactions to advertisements, and it's like, you do realize they're trying to sell you something, therefore if you have an emotional response to their advertising, you're going to remember them much more than if you just like, it was a cool logo or whatever, which didn't evoke a response. And it's just like the most valuable, because if you're feeling a bunch of joy while you're online, you're going to keep scrolling and therefore make more purchases. But it's like kind of the same with any emotion. It's like, because they're all addictive in one way or another. So I just wanted to touch on that to remind people that you're your emotions are a resource that other people can kind of exploit, which is like true with like interpersonal relationships, but it's less likely to be exploited than it is online, where it is very likely to be exploited. And my final point was that the digital space kind of limits our emotions to a certain set. So, for example, Facebook has 6 reactions. It used to be just like and dislike, but now it's 6 different, like care, anger, disgust, whatever.
Frame.
It's like
Frame one of those?
Probably. It's like the Pixar movie. It's like, but in reality, we have many more emotions than just those 6. But it almost forces us to distill our feelings down into just like one or the other. And it's like, are you mad or are you excited? And it's like, there is another option. It's like you're just neutral or whatever.
Yeah, and it's funny you reference Inside Out, because that was the whole premise of that film, was someone going through adolescence and kind of learning that you can be somewhere in between or more than one at once.
Yeah.
I have adolescence just written down in a disembodied bubble in my notes, because I think it's somewhere between emotions and influences. It just feels like a very teenage topic, and it reminded me of the first time I met someone who was in their mid-20s on TikTok, and I just thought, what's going on here?
Yeah, this is a place for kids.
No
to
offense to anybody listening.
To most people listening. You probably should reach a point in your life where you're not that you're not curious, but that you're not like edgy anymore, just for the sake of being edgy. Who's your favorite influencer?
I'm going to answer this with the meme of the week.
Okay.
I'm also going to try and mime it, so you have to try and guess what the meme is / who the influencer is. Okay?
I think I already have a guess. Oh, Arthur.
Yeah, I was doing the fist.
Yeah.
It's the Arthur fist meme. I loved Arthur as a child. I was thinking Solo Scene recommends this week. Arthur.
Go watch an episode, yeah.
Feels like a healthy thing to show your children. Not too much, though. Otherwise, they might start acting like DW. Which this episode actually references. Because do you know what the source of the fist is?
I think it's DW acting up, and Arthur's trying to contain his rage.
Exactly.
Because, is it called anger management, or did I make that up?
The episode?
Yeah.
The episode is called Arthur's Big Hit. It aired the same year we were born, 1999.
Oh, nice.
And this still, for people who don't know, it's just a a real close-up of Arthur's fist by his side.
Arthur being an aardvark, an animated aardvark, correct?
Yeah. Moments before he punches DW. That was the big hit. Because she broke his model airplane.
Yeah.
So those two are always going at it. And actually, when I say that Arthur was my influencer, I'm not too sure about that. I feel like I am a bit more of a DW or even a Binky. I always loved Binky.
You're more of a mischief maker.
If you know, you know. Yeah.
Yeah,
so a
like those
DW
guys.
type. But I also have Buster's hunger, so I don't know.
I don't know. It's funny.
So this meme originated on Twitter in 2016, and for once the caption actually kind of sums it up, everything that I was going to say. So the caption for the first meme wasn't really a meme, it just said, "This is just a pic of Arthur's fist, but IDK, I don't know. How I feel that it's just so relatable, so many emotions in one fist." But the primary emotion here is, I don't even think it's rage or anger. I think it's something that goes beyond that, or maybe somewhere different, which is pure frustration.
Yeah, frustration.
The rage
is the root.
maybe is the hit, right?
Yeah.
But that's not what went viral. What went viral is the containment in the fist.
Yeah.
And so I thought there was something to this idea of a bunch of, as I said, 20-somethings or 30-somethings on the internet kind of manifesting their collective frustration through a childhood reference. There was something to that.
Yeah, like frustration emerges when something like it's a pattern of being
Pattern, yeah.
not being disproven, but being let down. Like that's what frustration is. So it's like DW has done so many bad things to Arthur over the year, and you want her to have learned the lesson, then you get frustrated when it's like the 100th time and she hasn't learned the lesson. And that can manifest as, for me, often sadness and tears, but for some people rage, or for other people it might just be like apathy and withdrawal.
Notice also the year this image was posted on Twitter, which was 2016, as we frequently say when things went wrong. So, yeah, I mean, I really think it's about the lack of an outlet. That's what makes this meme so relatable.
Because it's not the picture of him punching.
That's what I said.
Yeah,
it's
okay.
The squeezing of the fist. And it reminds me a little bit of Scream rooms, how popular those are. It's just like, wouldn't it be nice to go to a place
Just let it all
to
out.
scream or break a plate? Wouldn't that be nice? Or throw a pillow on the floor, as you would do in your rage.
I never thought about it. Like, I don't know what I thought it meant, but I never realized, it's just like
It's the containment, it's the repression.
complete...
It's the, I have no mouth, but I must scream. That's what this meme is.
Yeah, it's an important meme. And how does it relate to influencers?
I don't know.
It's how it makes me feel sometimes.
Sure.
I'm like, you should have learned the lesson by now that you should stop posting your diet plan online.
Do you have a favorite influencer?
Probably. I really like Hitomi. I've talked about her like a million times.
Hitoms.
Yeah, she's probably one of my favorites. What's her name? There's another girl that I recently rediscovered and really liked her video. She did a video on anti-capitalist influencers, which she would consider herself one of. Kristen Leo, that's her name. Always first and middle, never first and last. But she's really good too. So she might be my actual favorite, my Solacene recommends in terms of influencers, because she's very anti-capitalist, anti-waste, she slow living, beauty, art. Like, she's pretty cool.
My Solacene recommends influencer is Binky Barnes from the Arthur series. Okay. I wrote down the two definitions of influencer because I thought it was quite a good jumping off point. One is a person who inspires or guides the actions of others. And the other, more modern one, is a person who's able to generate interest in something such as a consumer product by posting about it on social media. Mm-hmm. And so that one is obviously a bit more of a, let's use these people to extract money. But it also reminds me of the shift between celebrities in general, where it went from famous for doing something to famous just for being famous. That's what influencer reminds me of. So the first note that I had for this, which really was just a list of ways the Solacene can pretty much do away with influencers or minimize them, is to rename them.
Yeah, I think that's a good point.
And I think just renaming them models is the most accurate thing. Because most influencers, using that second definition, the people who sell things to you on social media, are attractive.
Yeah.
And that's why companies pay them to sell their products, which in most other industries is just called modeling.
Yeah.
So I think that's what if we rename them that, then it kind of more accurately defines what the process is, which is that it's not really influencing much beyond looks in a lot of cases or consumer behaviors, i.e. they are modeling.
Yeah, it reminds me of Animal Crossing and how there's like each of the different animals on the island kind of have their aesthetic. Like there's the sporty one, there's the one that likes flowers, the one that likes hearts. And it's like you would never want your life to just be like everything has a heart on it, but you kind of look at all of these different models on Animal Crossing and their homes and you pick and choose from their set of furniture and the things they're selling you and the lifestyle they're selling you, and you curate your own as a conglomeration of all of these things that you've kind of curated.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas sometimes with these influencers online, we think, I need exactly their life. But that's not what they're trying to do. They're trying to give you an example of like a kind of pure, this is what it's like if you only eat green leaves. I'm not saying you should only eat green leaves. I'm saying take a lesson from this and maybe apply it to your well-rounded life.
Yeah. The other thing I don't like about calling them capital I influencers, and I think they'd be better termed as models. Most of them are models. Some of them are other things. Like some of them are primarily entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
Like someone like Elon Musk is, to use the first definition, an influencer, has a very big influence. But it's a secondary trait or benefit as opposed to the thing that he was good at, which differs if you ask different people. But making money is quite obviously one. Or the Kardashians. It's like they are influencers, but the thing that they were good at really is beauty, I suppose.
Yeah.
So it's like models.
Yeah.
Or someone like Ronaldo. It's like he's an influencer on social media, probably using both definitions. But there was a thing that he was good at first, which was football. So I think, yeah, treating influence like a secondary benefit rather than something to which everybody should just strive without actually providing anything to society is a key thing. So I think in the Solacene society, getting rid of them or greatly reducing their number, because I don't think models will ever stop being an object of fascination, even if we kind of decrease the social media narcissism and vanity, just because beauty will always fascinate us, but it shouldn't be kind of the sole object of our fascination.
Yeah.
So I think, yeah, just making people want to be good at things other than looking nice.
Yeah, and another part of that is shifting in away from like the thing they're influencing us is basically what to buy 9 times out of 10.
Yeah.
It's often what to think as well, but it's like I feel like a lot of times the influence is what should I buy, or maybe just buying things that you didn't even need, whereas it perhaps used to be political or religious influence. Like the biggest influencers would be like Martin Luther King, these people who were like reforming the world and reforming the religion and reforming politics, whereas now it's like the biggest leaders are like, well, you should probably get better help or whatever, just like trying to sell you something. So in the Solacene, I think it'd be a bit more cool if they were idea peddlers versus product
like
peddlers. Yeah.
Well, yeah, that's an interesting type of influencer, because there's the boring one, the boring basic one, which won't really exist in the Solacene, of the person posing in a bikini on Instagram to sell the bikini.
Yeah.
But then you have the hitomis, who are more selling in operative words, because I don't know if she profits off of it really, a lifestyle of cleanliness, wholesomeness, ostensibly good things. She's modeling those things, in other words.
Yeah.
So, yeah, there's something to that. Are we influencers, or will we be?
Probably.
Oh.
Well, we want to try and, yeah, I think so. But we'll always be peddling in the ideas, less the products.
Yeah, but here's the thing, though. It's like, you never want influencer to be your
title, your
title
title
on Wikipedia.
Yeah.
It's more like, they are podcasters, or they are chefs. If we ever release a cake line.
Yeah. Okay. On the topic of influencers, the thing that got me thinking about them in the first place was how the job title or like the lifestyle of an influencer is so alluring to a lot of people. Like there was that study in America that it was like 7 out of 10 kids said they wanted to be a YouTuber or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And
are YouTubers influencers?
I think so.
So Hitomi, yes.
Yeah.
What about someone like Dashi Games? Someone who just plays video games. You think they're influencers?
I think everybody who has a following is an influencer.
Well, yeah, I guess. Well, okay, sorry.
Yeah. But the reason that I think this is so attractive to so many people is because, one, it gives you freedom, and it's kind of the only way to feel value in your life and how to also promote your art. So I think a lot of people who have an artistic inclination tend to gravitate towards this type of a job.
Yeah.
Because it's kind of, it used to be like, oh, if you have an artistic inclination, you can kind of express it in a lot of different ways. Like, you could be like a lot more tactile ways of like woodworking or working in a bakery or working in a restaurant, because there was kind of an outlet for that there. But now, because everything's so standardized, there's not an outlet for any kind of artistic personality trait.
I actually don't know how much of a new phenomena that is, kids wanting something like that.
Yeah.
It reminds me of just everyone for the last century saying, can't wait till I'm retired, then I'll be free to golf or paint or do whatever I want. It's just that kids our age and younger have kind of woken up to, why wouldn't I want that my whole life rather than first spending 50 years in an office?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. And it's like, because we have people modeling that it's completely doable from the get-go, that it's much more easy. One other thing I want to talk about in influencers is that they, as a job, it's not as alluring as it may seem, because like, you're not unionized, don't have any like benefits.
Oh,
and you can be like just exploited by these platforms. And especially, I mean, I'll highly recommend this video from Christian. I'm playing
a tiny violin for people who
But it's like, there's also just like, if you want to disseminate information like us about kind of an alternative lifestyle to the standard one, or one that will perhaps bring more joy and more well-being, it's like, you still have to use these platforms that you have like no control over. Like, we have no control over if SoundCloud invests in like hate crimes or whatever, but like, we still kind of have to rely on them. It's the same with people on YouTube and whatever. So it's kind of, I don't know. Just wanted to point that out, that it's not necessarily all perfect. And then the other thing is that, this is unrelated to that, but I feel like influencers in their current manifestation really push like the power of needing something at that moment, because whenever an influencer is doing a promo or whatever, it's like, use this code, you have 2 hours to use it, or else you're never going to be able to get this discount again.
Yeah.
But I think as consumers, we need to kind of release the desire to have things immediately, and just like accept the things that like things will come to you. And it's not just influencers, but it's kind of the whole online ecosystem of like the IKEA website or whatever, of just like, I need this now, it's easy, like it'll just come to me in a box and it'll be perfect. But it's like, if we release the idea, like kind of when we moved into our apartment, we were like, things will come to us, we're not going to buy everything unless it's completely necessary. And things do come to you in time. So you might just
have a couch for
months.
For months, yeah.
But now we have a couch that we adore, and we're like, we'll probably have this the rest of our lives, or until it falls apart.
Right.
So it's like, it's a hard mindset to get into, because you're sitting on the floor for 6 months. But it's like, the reason that we sometimes jump to these sales and jump to these like IKEA options is economic, of like, it's the cheapest option, I guess I have to do it. Like, we've done that. We bought kind of garbage chairs for our island, but they fell apart within like a few months. But it's like, if you kind of release the expectation of needing things immediately, you can maybe like find chairs on the side of the road, or find them for free on Facebook Marketplace. I don't know.
Yeah, I have written down here, in the solo scene, obviously being less materialistic and also smarter purchases will mean that we are essentially less swayed by the models of the thing.
Yeah.
So it's less like, oh, I like that person's singing voice, I want her shampoo. You know, it doesn't make any sense. So it's also that thing about celebrities as idols, celebrity worship, which is a very weird and awful thing that in the solo scene won't really be the case. I'm reminded of the famous or infamous quotes about Lady Gaga. I like some of the Gaga songs, but what does she know about cameras? When she was made like a Polaroid spokesperson. Yeah. So, or creative director.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
That's a very strange thing. So I kind of had 3 gets in terms of directives for the solo scene reducing idolatry, I suppose, of celebrities or influencers. One is get off internet.
Get off internet.
The next is get some self-respect. Because I think also the case, let's be real, with the influencers, as I say, they're models. It's like, why are you just following people because they look nice? You know, like get some self-respect, in other words. Go outside. And that's why the third thing is get some real friends. Because the person who perhaps might be a healthier relationship when they are trying to influence you on financial matters, philosophical matters, religious matters, social matters, political matters, might just be your cool uncle or neighbor.
Yeah.
You know, there's something to that. There's something to the fact that I know it's easier and it can seem more of a lucrative thing to go online and just listen to a famous political pundit and have that be your influencer, but maybe it's healthier to just, not just because it's a harder thing, but to forge a real relationship with somebody. So this gets also into the parasocialness.
Yeah, and when your uncle or neighbor are recommending these things to you, you know a lot more about them, so you might know their bias. But when you consume opinions online, you don't necessarily know the person's bias, their history, what they're pushing, who's sponsoring them. Because, I mean, increasingly there's more transparency with saying if something's an ad, but it's still not completely transparent. There's no rules on podcasting, for example, to say if your guest is being paid to be there or paying you to be there. Like you don't know.
I'm being paid to be here.
Yeah. So, like, you don't know, and you can kind of, it really prides on our desire to have relationships with humans and, like, our trustworthiness of other people, and it's quite exploitative. I mean, I think I've probably told this 100 times, but in business school it was told, like, this is a really great way to get people to buy your product, is exploiting the fact that they will always trust personal recommendations above, like, corporate marketing.
In a way, I just don't feel much sympathy for any adult who falls for that kind of thing. But in the solo scene, I know we will be properly training children, media literacy, etc. Do we have any fun thing that we can close the episode out? A joke, perhaps? We already had solo scene recommends, but do we have any like joke that we can leave them laughing, send them away laughing?
No.
I have one, I think. I heard it this week, and I will probably butcher it. I didn't think about it before the episode starts. So it's, why did the Scarecrow get an award?
Why?
Because it was outstanding in its field.
Thanks for listening, everybody.
Bye.